Yeah, it's about 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Does it need to be pushed on here, or is it? No, it's on. Hello, hello. Is it working? Oh, now it's working. All right. We shall begin then. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavati Tamastu Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We are continuing our readings from a book called Religion and Its Practice. And we are reading the Spiritual Aspirant and Practices, which was by Swami Sardananda. And we don't have too much left to do with this, so when we finish that, we will be doing the Worshipper and the Worship by Swami Turiyananda. They don't tell you the author in the text. You have to go back to the table of contents. Pretty peculiar. All right, so we'll begin on page 23 if you're following along.
But there is one point which needs elucidation here. Though these visions have their inception in the subjective mind of the devotee, yet in the matured state of meditation, when the vistas of the thought world are opened up to the mental gaze, they assume all the true colorings of objective reality as experienced in the waking state. And as these divine visions begin to come oftener and oftener, and the consciousness of the reality of thought world grows deeper and deeper, scales fall from the devotee's eyes, and he begins to perceive that the so-called objective world, with all its apparent concreteness, is but an imagination of the mind. And again, the visions in the state of deep meditation appear with such an all-absorbing reality that for the time being the objective world is completely obliterated from his consciousness. And this state has been described in the Shastras as Savakalpa Samadhi. In that state of consciousness, though the material world disappears altogether, yet there still remains for him the other world, the world of thought. Then the bhakta feels the joys and sorrows of life, which is God exactly as we feel, with his God exactly as we feel in our relations with the objects and persons of the outside world. Only there is this difference, that the web of all his emotions and desires is woven around his beloved. And as various waves of thoughts still arise in his mind around the central theme, his Lord, the Shastras define the state as Savakalpa Samadhi, or the superconscious state where meditation is not completely stopped,
Mentation.
but is held fast to one idea only.
It says mentation.
Mentation.
Where mentation is not completely stopped.
Right.
All right. So, wonderful description of Savakalpa Samadhi. And of course, these visions of deities, I might have mentioned this before. It seems like there's a co-creative process going on where the God, the infinite, undivided, unchanging Brahman, is able to take various forms according to the situation for the devotee. So a devotee of Krishna, God can take the form of Krishna, or if a devotee of Durga can take the form of Durga. And if you have a propensity to be open to many forms of the deities, then God might take any one of these forms as appropriate for a particular time. Some of our direct disciples, mainly Swami Brahmananda and Swami Vijnanananda, they were known for having a variety of visions. And people saw Sri Ramakrishna in conjunction with various deities. So these things are quite fluid, and it seems to be a co-creative process as to which particular deity is manifest. And then he says that you go through various stages of how the real world seems to disappear or not seem as real as the state that you're experiencing, and that the reality of the spiritual realm is what's really real. And it's you and the beloved. In Salvakapi Samadhi, it's you and the beloved, you and your chosen ideal that are really the main reality. All right, let's go on and see what he says.
Thus, by meditating on one object of the thought world, the perceptions of the gross external world disappear altogether. And when one idea gets hold of the mind strongly, all other ideas fall off from it. The bhakta who has advanced so far is not far from the state of nirvikalpa samadhi. It is needless to point out that he who has succeeded in getting rid of the idea of the reality of the world has got his will sufficiently strengthened and his mind sharpened. And as a result, he soon comes to learn that if he can bring about a complete cessation of all mentations, his enjoyment of the divine bliss will be much intenser than hitherto. And so his mind eagerly runs towards the realization of that state. And through the grace of the God and the Guru, he too soon crosses the thought world and realizes the absolute unity, and thereby attains eternal bliss. Or it may be that his intense love itself for God takes him ultimately to that state, and then he feels, like the gopis of Vrindavan, his identity with the beloved. There have been described in our Shastras the two processes of jnana and bhakti for reaching that state of nirvikalpa samadhi.
So the basic point here is that it doesn't matter which path you take, you can still reach nirvikalpa samadhi. In the bhakti path, you go through the initial state of the salvikalpa samadhi, where you experience the bliss of your chosen ideal, and then that bliss leads you forward into the nirvikalpa samadhi. Nirvikalpa means without form. So both of those lead you to that state. And this, of course, is the easier path by far, because it gives you something to hold on to in the meantime. The jnani path is more difficult because there's nothing really to grab onto. There's nothing concrete. You're going into the Buddhists would call it the void. We would call it the infinite, undivided, unchanging. But it doesn't much matter. It's like, I often compare it to an infinite beach ball. You try to grab an infinite beach ball and there's nothing to hang on to. It's just too big. And your hands just slip off of it because it's like trying to pick up a wall. It's so large and infinite. An infinite ball is going to appear flat to you, you see. And that's the way it is with the path of jnana and trying to reach nirvikalpa samadhi that way. But people have certainly done it, so it's not like it's impossible. All right, let's continue. We're going to start the worshiper and the worshipped. So that's kind of appropriate to slip into this. We've just been talking about how one meditates on a divine form and has Salvakava Samadhi. So now Swami Turiyananda is going to take up this topic of the worshipper and the worshipped. All right.
No worshipper worships matter. The Satchidananda form of the divine is the one object of worship of all devotees. The enjoyment of heaven and such other objects only those who are full of desires pray for. Having enjoyed the vast Sarvakaloka, heaven, they enter the mortal world on the exhaustion of their merit. Thus, abiding by the injunctions of the Vedas, desiring desires, they constantly come and go. Quote from the Gita. This is for those who are devoted to rituals. The attainment of heaven is not the goal of the true worshippers. To them, the question is about the Atman, the self, which is existence, knowledge, bliss, which is of the nature of intelligence. The worshippers, according to their samskaras, inherent tendencies, look upon this one Atman or Brahman as different objects of worship. Some see him as the whole, and themselves as parts of him. But some again see him as non-different from themselves. Some others again see him as the great Lord, different from themselves. But even they do not think of themselves as inert matter, but as spirit.
Okay, this is a long paragraph, so I'm just going to break in here for a minute. Of course, he's describing the three types of Vedanta. The three schools of Vedanta are the Dvaita school, where you think of God as the Lord, different from yourself, and the Vishishta Dvaita, the qualified non-dualists, who think of yourself as part of the divine, and then the Advaitas, the complete non-dualists, who think of themselves as not different from the infinite, undivided, unchanging Brahman. Now, of course, you can still take that attitude that you are not different from Brahman and still do forms of worship. It's that you consciously take on the forms of worship in order to realize that truth that you know to be true, but you know is difficult to do directly, so you take an indirect path. So, as he says, we might have concrete images and so forth, but it doesn't mean we're worshiping the matter that the images are made out of. We're using those as symbols. And the true worshiper in our tradition is not going after attainments of some sort of heavenly realm, but to realize the identity of Atman with Brahman. All right, we can continue this nearly infinite paragraph.
Therefore, we find that the question of inertness with respect to the worshiper never arises at all. The worshiper and the worshipped both are spirit, but only according to differences in the samskaras of the worshiper, the relation also differs. Once Sri Rama, seeing Hanuman amongst the sages that had assembled before him, in order to satisfy all his devotees, he asked him, "Well, how do you look upon me?" Hanuman, the best of the Jnanis, seeing some great purpose behind this question, replied, "When I think of myself as the body, then I am thy servant. When I think of myself as the Jivatman, the individual soul, I am thy part. And when I think of myself as the Atman, I am thyself. And this is my conclusive opinion." Thus Hanuman happened to express the attitude of all the devotees. And this is the essence of Vedanta. None has been disappointed in this. On the other hand, each has been given his proper place. None need despair. In whatever stage they may be, all of them worship the one Lord and establish relationships with him. I am centered in the hearts of all. Memory and perception, as well as their loss, come from me. I am verily that which is known, has to be known by all the Vedas. I indeed am the author of Vedanta, and the knower of the Vedas am I. Bhagavad Gita. That one intelligent principle, the supreme Purusha, pervades everything like the warp and woof. He is the one to be known in all the Vedas, the creator of Vedanta, as well as the knower of the Vedas. If this is known, you have attained the goal of Vedanta. If this is not known, even if you should make a solution of the Vedas and take it, you will not know the truth of Vedanta. I have understood it only in this sense. The Master's words, I and my mother, we two exist. Even this is to be understood in this way. He does not talk of matter and spirit. He has talked only of spirit. The worshipped, as well as the worshiper, both are spirit. The child knows none else but his mother, steadfast devotion. He is everything. For what avails thee to know all this diversity, O Arjuna? Know thou this, that I exist, supporting this whole world by a portion of myself. The Gita. He pervades the whole world with but a fourth part of his, and the rest three-fourths is beyond everything, ever free. Even the Vedas sing his glory thus. All the creatures are but a fourth part of him. The rest three-fourths is in heaven and free. Rig Veda.
So again, this idea that Hanuman presents here, these three attitudes, either being the servant, or thinking yourself as a part of the whole, or thinking yourself as identical with the whole. These are things that not only a person could choose between, but they're attitudes that we might find ourselves slipping into during different situations. There are situations where we may feel much more identified with our bodies. And so if we're identified with our bodies, then the appropriate attitude is, I am thy servant, O Lord. But if we can think of ourselves as that individual jiva, soul, that has the Atman animating it from within, then we can think that we are a part of the whole. That might perhaps come up in a particular meditation or a particular mood. And if your meditation deepens, you might be able to take that attitude that you're one with the infinite. So it might, all three attitudes might indeed, just like Hanuman, come to the same person. And it doesn't mean we're necessarily have to take exactly the same attitude all the time. So they've been quoting things from the Gita and so forth. And the idea here is, again, that Brahman is all pervading. So there isn't anything but Brahman. So we have to be Brahman. There isn't anything else. And Brahman supports the whole universe with just a part of itself. And the rest is completely unknown. Probably, perhaps all the other realms that we hear talked about, the different spiritual realms, the more subtle realms and causal realms, and realms beyond our comprehension. So all of these are coming from Brahman. And so if everything is coming from Brahman, then that is what we need to know. And if we don't know that, then we've missed the point. And all the various things that we might find in the Vedas should be leading us towards that realization. They should be guiding us towards that realization. But just memorizing them and not really digesting them doesn't do any good. We have to eventually come to that realization. All right.
This much about Brahman. As regards the individual soul, if it has the body idea, then he is the Lord, and it is the servant. If it has the jiva consciousness, then he is the whole, and it is the part. And when it gets the knowledge that it is the Atman, then there is no idea of differentiation. Then it identifies itself with the Paramatman and says, I am thyself. That is the goal of the individual soul. This is Vedanta knowledge accepted on all hands. He is everything, the knower, knowledge, and known. All these are but he. The Atman, the individual soul and nature. All these are he. There's nothing else than he. He who says there is something else besides him is still under delusion.
Right, and so this knower, knowledge, and known, that's the original, you could say, if we can talk in terms of a temporal happening, which really isn't accurate, but just for the sake of discussion, when Brahman manifests as the many, the first thing that would have to happen is the creation of a subject and an object. And everybody thinks they're the subject and that everything else is the object. It's interesting, you know, the quantum physics, the famous quantum physicist Erwin Schrödinger said, after analyzing what quantum physics seemed to be saying, he said, there is no objective evidence for the plurality of the observer. So even though I think I'm an observer and you think you're an observer and everybody thinks they're a separate observer, as far as quantum mechanics goes, there's no objective evidence that there's more than one observer here. And the reason for that is that the observer collapses the probability wave function, and you can't have two people doing that. You can't have two different observers doing that. There has to only be one observer in the universe. So that's one of the strange things about quantum mechanics. Really, the physics, the reason the physics gets stranger and stranger is that we think we're living in a real world when we're living in a world of Maya, and Maya is not a real world. It's a make-believe world. And so, as Swami Ashokananda famously said, the most you can know about an unreal world is that it's unreal. You can go about analyzing all the details you want, and we can get better and better models of it. And these can be useful within the realm of Maya, but it's not going to solve the ultimate problem. As I often say, we can sit around and argue whether the thing that we see, the rope that we see as a snake, we can argue about what species it is all day and all night, and nobody's ever going to be right, and no one's ever going to be able to prove that they're right, because it's not a snake at all, it's just a rope. And so it's that kind of situation. But the knower and the known have to separate each other. So the knower is the subject, the known is the object, and whenever you have those two, then you have a third. You have the process of knowing. And so you find that in our physical universe as well. The light beam is sort of, you could say, the process of knowing. We see everything away from us in space and backward in time by the trick that light can join us together in a event where there is no separation. The event that the light is bouncing off of everything that I'm seeing, and the event that it's reaching my eyeballs, the separation between those two events is always zero. And so if the separation is always zero, it means it's in space-time, it's really one, it's undivided. That's the nature of Brahman. Brahman is undivided. And so, but when you see it as a knower and a known, a subject and an object, then you see it out there, spaced out there, and backward in time, and you have to have some process of knowing. and that's the light that comes back and forth. And so we have this whole system. It's interesting how the whole universe seems to be, again, based on these pairs of opposites that then also have some sort of kink in them, so they can't just collapse. So space and time are a pair of opposites, but space has 3 dimensions and time has 1 dimension. So they're not opposite in all senses. They're just opposite in this one sense. It's also interesting that in our physics, the electron's mass only depends on its smallness in the electrical field. And I think that represents the singularity of the knower, the subject. The subject only depends on itself, and it only knows itself. The electron only depends on its smallness in the electrical field. That's the infinitude showing through. The fact that the electron has a mass in the electrical field is because we see it as small, and it's really infinite. Then the proton has much more mass than the electron because its mass is due to its separation from all the other mass in the entire universe. It knows about every other bit of matter in the entire universe because it has to be separated from it in order to have the mass that it has. And of course, it feels the attraction by gravity of all the other mass in the universe. And so that's the plurality of the object. The object is plural, and that's represented by the proton. The subject is singular, and that's represented by the electron. Isn't that interesting that our physics actually mirrors the nature of this crazy world of Maya that's split into a knower and known? All right, let's go on here. I interrupted in the middle of the paragraph again.
There is nothing else than he. He who says there is something else besides him is still under delusion. He talks in sleep. He does not realize what he is talking. Due to superimposition and contrary knowledge, Brahman, in which there is not the least tinge of this duality, appears as this manifold universe. It is only in this wise that the scriptures say.
This wise, it's only in this wise.
But from this Atman, ether is produced, and so forth. But not in reality. From the absolute standpoint, there is neither destruction nor creation, neither the bound nor the worshipper, neither the aspirant nor the liberated. This is the conclusion. Study, japa, meditation, concentration, samadhi, these no one says are the highest goal. Knowing him alone, they transcend death. There is no other way to freedom.
That would be the
Upanishads.
Yeah, the Swatana. Okay.
This is the teaching of Vedanta. The Lord also says in the Gita, all these worlds, O Arjuna, including the realm of Brahma, are subject to return. But after attaining Ma, O son of Kunti,
That would be me.
there is no rebirth.
It's supposed to be a me.
I am the self, O good Akesha, existent in the hearts of all beings. I am the beginning, the middle, and also the end of all beings.
Yeah, and now that quote from the Taittiriya Upanishad, where it starts out, he just gave the very beginning of it in this. From this Atman, the ether is produced, and it goes on through the 5 elements. And of course, the first element in Sanskrit is Akasha, which can be translated as space. Of course, there isn't anything such as ether anymore in Western science, but it could be translated as space. And it goes through the 5 elements. And so from the Akasha flows Vayu, or wind. Again, the Greeks used an example of what wind is made of, air, but it's not air, it's wind. It's the kinetic energy of the wind. And then from Vayu comes Tejas, It's not fire. Agni is fire. Tejas is that which shines. It's anything that shines. It's things that radiate. It's radiation. And then from Tejas comes up, and then Prithivi, and then it goes on to say that from this, the energy gets picked up by the plants, or it's manifest in the sun, and then it gets picked up in the plants, and then it gets picked up by the animals, and then it gets incorporated in you. So it goes through the whole series of energies. You see, these are energies. These 5 elements are really energies. They're not like the elements of our current chemical periodic table. These elements are energies. And the reason we know they're energies is that the scriptures associated these 5 elements with your sense organs. And your sense organs pick up energy. So your ears pick up where you are in the gravitational field. So that's gravitational energy. Your skin can feel motion and temperature changes. And so that's kinetic energy. Your eyes pick up radiation, things that shine, radiate. That's associated with your eye. And then your tongue can taste things that are sour. Sour things have to have a hydrogen ion, a plus hydrogen ion, which is a proton. So that's electricity. And then your nose picks up the earth element, and that's because your sense of smell depends on the way the magnetic fields in the molecules are laid out. That's how your nose distinguishes from one thing to another. So these 5 energies, these 5 elements of the universe literally make up the whole universe, just as we would suspect, because E equals mc squared, and the whole universe is made out of energy. So these energies then get manifest in the universe, and then the chain of energy that we're used to in our particular case is that the radiation of the sun, well, so the sun falls together by gravity. That's the first thing it does. And then it heats up, that's kinetic energy, because the molecules get all scrambled, because they've just fallen into each other. And so that's kinetic energy. And then when it gets hot enough, it shines. It's going to get hot and shine long before nuclear fusion starts, by the way. But once it gets hot enough, then nuclear fusion starts, and it keeps it hot. Then it radiates, and so that's tejas, and then that energy flows to everything that's around it and flows back down here to the earth and gets picked up by the plants, and the plants create stored energy, and then we pick up the stored energy when we munch on the plants. So the whole universe flows from these 5 energies, and these 5 energies make up the whole universe. And they all flow from Brahman. And the reason we have 5 sense organs is that we have these 5 basic energies. Now, I know that does leave out nuclear energy, but there's no sense organ for that. And it's not, and it's the only place, before we started nuclear reactions on the Earth, the only place you really got that was inside of a sun. So it's understandable that we wouldn't count that. All right, so this is the whole process, and this is the way the manifest universe works. This is the way the creation works. And so we're trying to get beyond that. We're trying to get back to Brahman itself. Even Brahma is a temporary post. That's another thing that I like to remind people of, is that all the gods and goddesses that we worship and talk about and have pujas for and so forth, they are within the realm of Maya. They are the aids within Maya to help us understand what's beyond Maya. You have to have some hints, or it's like a treasure hunt, you know. They have to leave you hints here and there. Well, that's what you get with the Sattva Guna and with the various deities. The hints as to what's behind it, the nature of Brahman itself. All right, so we are going to start with, we just ended with I am the beginning, middle, and the end of all beings, okay?
The goal, the supporter, the Lord, the witness, the abode, the refuge, the friend, the origin, the dissolution, the substratum, the storehouse, the seed immutable. There is no need to say further that to the jiva, he is everything. As already said, it is not a thing for mere reasoning. It has to be realized. Having come to taste mangoes, it's better to taste them. What is the use of other vain talk? Those alone whom the Lord selects as teachers have to think of others as to whether a particular faith would do good or harm to people. For us, it is enough if we can but taste the mangoes.
Well, we finished a whole other lecture.
There's a note. Do you want me to read the note?
Yeah, go ahead and read the footnote.
This refers to one of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. When you go to a mango orchard, it's better to get acquainted with the owner and with his permission to enjoy the fruits than waste your time and energy in counting the number of trees, the number of fruits and leaves on the trees, and in vain discussions on mango culture. Similarly, being born in this world, it's better to realize God and enjoy bliss than waste time in studying nature.
Of course, there's that old joke, the two people went out to view the sheep, and they weren't sure they were all there, so they said, "Oh, okay, let's both count them, and we'll see if we come up with the right answer, or the same answer." And so, this one guy finishes way ahead of the other one, and he said, 65. He says, "How'd you get it so fast?" "I counted the feet and divided by 4. Just counting the leaves there. So, obviously, that's a silly idea. But anyway, that's a common thing that we tend to do, is we tend to want to look at all the details about things and figure out all about how things work and so forth. Whereas what we really should be working at is to go for the gold and go for realizing and being one with Brahman. Now, that's not that easy, so we have to keep our mind in the right place. And so keeping our mind in the right place often involves a great deal of talking and reasoning and sharing notes and comparing ideas and so forth. And that helps us to convince ourselves of the value of the goal and the necessity for reaching the goal. So those things are not useless at all. They're very useful as far as sadhana goes. In fact, they often say that reading scriptures and books, religious books, is like having holy company, and that holy company is essential to our spiritual development. Again, it keeps our mind and thinking process in the right place. They've done experiments now where they can show that people's thoughts can affect other people's thoughts. You can put one person in a Faraday cage, which is a cage which eliminates any kind of electromagnetic waves getting through. And then you put somebody else in another one, and you show the one that's not in the Faraday cage a series of images. It might be things that are funny or beautiful or extremely disturbing. So a variety of pictures. And so they know what kind of brain waves these might elicit in people. And sure enough, about, I think it's something like 2 out of 7. That's not a terribly large percentage, but it's a significant percentage. The brain waves of the person in the Faraday cage show the same kind of reactions as the person actually watching the videos, from pleasant to disturbing. And so you want to be around people and fill your mind with the most uplifting thoughts that you can. If you're around a lot of people that have very disturbed thoughts or very worldly thoughts, then it's much harder to keep your mind in focus, because while you're probably not picking up all of those things, you're probably picking up some of them. There's going to be a certain vibrational level that permeates your particular space in those atmospheres. And we're all a bit sensitive to that. That's why we find it easier to come and meditate in a temple or a church rather than going to a football stadium or a bar. It's just the atmosphere is just, even if the places are empty, the atmosphere just isn't the same. The whole, the furniture and the stands and everything in those places pick up the mood of the people that are there day after day, night after night. And so just being in that space, you tend to get that kind of feeling. That's why a lot of students go to the library to study rather than studying in their room. It's easier to study in the library. Number one, you don't have distractions, and people have been studying in those libraries for decades, maybe centuries, if you're going to someplace like Oxford or Harvard. And so you have that energy of focused scholastic attention going for you, just as when you go into an ancient temple like in Varanasi, or in Puri, or if you go to a great cathedral in Europe, then you find that it's much easier to focus your mind on spiritual things, because people have been doing that for literally centuries. So, and of course, in the Christian tradition, Jesus said, whenever two or more people are gathered together in my name, you see. That's the whole idea. You get an additive effect of that energy, that mental energy, when you have a group of people that are all thinking alike. And so that kind of thing is very important. So you can get a bit of that. Fortunately, you can get a bit of that online without having to force your way through traffic these days. But there's also an extra benefit for being in person. So we still hold these classes in person, even though the majority of people are doing it remotely, which I can certainly understand, especially on a Friday night. It's not that easy to fight your way through the Hollywood traffic. I often wish I didn't have to drive through Hollywood traffic to get anywhere, but that's the way it goes. We will continue next time, probably with the lecture on, where's the next one we're going to do? Truthfulness. And let's see, truthfulness was, truthfulness is another one. We're going back to Premananda. So we'll be working with Premananda again next week. Remember that Swami Premananda was quite a loving soul, as his name would indicate. And Swami Prabhupada often talked about how special he was. And he was, I think, the first head of Belar Mat, not the head of the whole order, but sort of managed the monastery. Saradananda was the secretary of the order. Turiyananda, of course, came to the San Francisco Center and founded Shanti Ashram in the San Jose Hills. Saradananda spent his time in the East Coast for a few years, and it's a shame that we don't have more lectures recorded. You'd think somebody would have taken down shorthand and recorded these lectures that these great souls did, because we have so much of Swami Vivekananda and Swami Abhedananda, but we don't have nearly as much for Saradananda, Turiyananda, and Trigunatitananda, who all spent time in the United States. Really, the United States was quite blessed to have had so many direct disciples come over. All right, well, we'll conclude there.
You want to tell where you can get the book?
Yes, you can get the book at Vedanta Bookshop, any of our bookshops, Santa Barbara, Hollywood, Trabuco, Even San Diego has a small shop. If you ask them, they'll get it for you. And Vedanta Catalog carries it online, so you can also get it there if you'd like to follow along. All right, we'll close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace. All right. Nice to see you. Karma Yoga tomorrow.